Hello and welcome to another video. So today we're taking a look at a mid-sword deck. Mid-sword is a very interesting craft overall because it does have a fair bit of variation to some of them. I personally only have one Arthur, that's the first thing I'll point out. You very quickly would want to run 2 as a minimum and probably swap out something in the lower end. I think I added an extra Lux Solar Lancer, so I think the original deck build only had 1. So running 2 of these wasn't too big a change. I mean, it lets me draw Albert a little more consistently, and I can also pull Arthur off it as well, along with Luminous Mage, which is kind of okay, but mostly you're looking for Arthur, hence its effect of 6+, really want that Arthur pull. So, other than that, the deck is pretty straightforward. You want to be ramming followers in and getting as much face damage as you can, because it is a mid-sword deck after all. It still has a fairly good amount of aggression, but also a great amount of clear when losing Lancer of Tempest, or just in general board floody cards that really put pressure on your opponent. So we'll get right into some games and check it out. First up is Bloodcraft. Bloodcraft always keeps things interesting, being another pretty aggressive deck for the most part, especially since most that you will see in ladder are either neutral blood or vengeance blood. There is the occasional control blood, but I think that is a little rarer on the rotation side, whereas it's much more common in the unlimited side of play. So we start off with a very average hand. Flame of Shield is pretty good, and Gourmet Emperor is actually pretty great against blood because it is a constant source of followers that blood isn't going to banish. Luminous Mage on the other hand is okay. I mean, again, it's not the best thing. And Lux and Council of the Card Knights both do their job, but they're just a little awkward to play in this hand in particular because we don't really have a solid curve. So I did play Lux here. I was just testing the waters with the deck so far and really just wanted to have something out on 2 that I could use consistently, especially with something like Shield of Flame or Gourmet Emperor. I just wanted something on board that could have some potential damage. Unfortunately, they did happen to throw the Spiderweb Imp down, which really limits what I can do board-wise. Of course, Blood Drink is Brand, ruining my day again for 4 damage. And just a pretty normal trade. But we've got an okay hand from here, I guess. The double Shield of Flame will definitely help us clear this out. We can also take out this 1/1 with the ultimate carrot, which it'll be infinitely recycled. So that's always a positive when you can infinitely recycle carrots over and over and over again. Always a great time when you can have those. We do have the Albert, which is looking pretty promising, especially going into this next turn. I mean, 9 damage off this turn alone is pretty good when it can be followed up by another 5 damage if we need to, or something like Council of Card Knights if we don't have the option. So, I mean, 5 damage next turn off Albert is actually lethal. Well, not quite lethal. It's very close. I mean, we'll be 4 off. That's pretty reasonable in my eyes. But that healing does kind of disrupt the strategy a little bit, especially since the Evolve will kill my Albert. And it won't quite kill the Scarlet Saber, so Council of the Card Knights is the play on this mark, mainly because you get a 1/3 Storm that you can then ram into this 4/1. You also get to keep a Bane out, which means any follower they bring down is going to have a harder time dealing my board. While at the same time, I can kind of just set up for hopefully the Albert in the late game, for that kind of turn 9 Albert where we go for 10 damage. But this is definitely a more control-orientated blood list that we're versing, so it is a little bit difficult to just keep up, I guess, would be the way to go. We need to try and keep our board flowing, make sure that every single turn they're forced to deal with us and we're not forced to deal with them as much. Of course, the Belf makes my job just slightly easier, putting them in range of that Albert, but Mask of Black Death throws that right out the window. Really disappointing that Mask of Black Death is the card that locks me out of this match so far. But we do have 2 carrots, so, I mean, it's a shot. Carrots do make good trade fodder though for this Belf. Although I probably could have just thrown the 6-drop and then, you know, ram the carrots to face. They would have been neutralized anyway, so I just didn't really see the need to go that far. But we build a pretty solid board going into our next turn, and we can pretty easily remove this Mask of Black Death now. While at the same time Luminous Mage actually gets some advantage. Although this 4/5 is a pain, at least we can remove it effectively, while setting up even more carrots. I mean, who doesn't want to set up carrots when they remove Mask of Black Death? It's definitely not the easiest matchup, this one. It definitely was fun. I don't usually see too many control-orientated blood decks, but when you do, it's always an enjoyable time in the rotation format, that is. Because it's just a breath of fresh air compared to some of the more aggressive decks that you see out there. So I had to come up with the best way to trade here, and after thinking about it for a little bit, Shield of Flame and allowing me to deal 6 damage I think was the best option. I could have forced the Evolve, but I really wanted to save that for the Albert in case we do have to get past another Zeus or something that could be real trouble for us to deal with. Of course, the Scarlet Saber coming down again, giving them 2 more health. And Mask of Black Death, really ruining my whole game plan going into this. But Luminous Mage is actually going to help quite a bit. We can throw both of them down, we can then start using some 3 Evolves to remove this 2-4, and if we can just stick a Luminous Mage, we could be set. And if we can't stick a Luminous Mage, at least we have something solid on board to clear out the Mask of the Black Death. And of course, Emeralda again, being a little bit of a nuisance. But we actually had lethal that turn, and I completely missed it. I don't know why I completely missed it. I could have played the Albert, went with the Evolve, rammed for 5, removed the Mask of Black Death, thrown the 2 and rammed for another 5 for a total of 7. So it was just a small stuff up. I mean, it was one of the first few games that I played with this deck, so it's not too bad, but definitely something to keep an eye out for, those just obscure lethals against Mask of Black Death, where throwing the Albert to the board, even with it on there, does mean you can secure a game. Definitely made it trickier, but I do realise at this turn that I can actually throw that Albert into their face for 5 damage, removing both the Masks of Black Death at the same time, and then going for lethal anyway. So at least I realised it the second time around, not so lucky on the first, but it worked out and we ended up with a really nice lethal. So this next game is against Portal. I've been seeing a few more Portals around lately, which is really nice. I do enjoy the Portal matchups. They keep me on my toes when I need to find out what's going on in the meta. So we start off with a pretty bad hand, honestly. 2 4-drops and a 3-drop. None of our 2-drop early game. I do decide to keep the Frontline Cavalier just because it's a nice heal and can present some nice bodies to really tank out this Portalcraft player. I mean, when you can expect artifacts, while there is some surprise cards, it's really not too bad just to kind of play it out and see where it goes. And of course, Mecha Wing Swordsman, pretty solid turn 2. And our Shield of Flame is a nice kind of follow-up to that. It does at least remove it, which means we don't have to deal with it. That's always a plus. We can avoid them. But it looks like they are going to have basically a perfect curve. And we don't really have much else in the way of curving out. But Geno does make up for it a little bit. I mean, a 4-3 Storm is at least going to be able to tank this 2-3, which couldn't be much better in that situation. In the early Acceleradium, I've been seeing this kind of deck around the last few matches, and really has been piquing my interest. The Portalcraft deck I played last time wasn't running Acceleradium, but it's a very similar build to this. I really want to mess around with a little bit and see if I can find this deck list in particular. I'm sure I will by the time this video is released, but it's always an interesting one. So we regain full health, we get to tank that the 2-3. While at the same time I'm setting up a couple of 1-2s, which like I said are great against Portal because it does force some form of trading. Which means we're surviving our health and making them burn resources. And of course, Gourmet Emperor, another card that's great in the Portal matchup as well, just because it does give you that infinite carrot value, which quite regularly you can play out. Makes it hard for these ancient artifacts to really deal with the board, because carrots is going to keep killing them repeatedly. Of course, Deus Ex Machina, perfectly on 6. This Portal player has actually had an extremely good start. I couldn't fault most of their plays in this match. But we get a really nice 2 damage in with the carrot. I mean, why not? if we can get some carrot value, why wouldn't we? The Banish, though, really kind of stuffing up our day. Lucky we have a couple more Gourmet Emperors in the deck to secure us some more carrots. And they really don't go for much else. I mean, they throw these ancient artifacts, the lion, all that to the board. Really just trying to present me with a problem to solve. And Arthur, I mean, is basically enough to deal with this. I mean, Arthur on his own is reasonable in this deck. I'm still not the biggest fan of Arthur as a card. I don't think he's an absolute powerhouse. I think he's quite nicely balanced, which is good. If we see some really overpowered officers in rotation next time around, or even commanders for that matter, I think we could see Arthur maybe see more play if they synergize well together. But as it stands, I think Arthur's just a pretty good to average board floody card for Sword. That Sword didn't really have any kind of major board flood like that, where it could just fill the board in one go with reasonable followers and contest other big board floody type decks. And perfect. Lancer of Tempest off the top is exactly what we need to deal with this. It does also let us ping a couple more damage. And we already have one Albert, which is going to look really good next turn. So if we can get that Albert out, we should be able to secure the game pretty reasonably. The only difficult part now is dealing with the Spinaria, which is really going to mess with our game plan. Especially since Hamlin most likely just duplicated that ancient artifact. It does mean they can ping this entire board with Spinaria's effects. So we really want to deal with this, which luckily the Lancer of Tempest draw again deals with it really well. I could have just thrown the Albert and went face for 10, but I think leaving up a board that was so dangerous wouldn't have been a good idea. I mean, they could have traded the artifacts in very, very easily and then quite quickly just pinged off my board, which would have been really dangerous. So I think the play that we made was the better one. Although we do have to now take a huge chunk of damage, especially during that second Albert. We actually have lethal over a 2-turn setup, so 10 damage here, 6 damage next turn is lethal. All we have to hope is that they can't have another Radiant Artifact. If they do have a Radiant Artifact in hand, it's going to be their game. A Saphira would also be quite bad. So it's 2 cards that we've got to hope they just don't have, which with the way they're trading obviously indicates that they most likely don't have it. And it does turn out they had another Radiant Artifact, which they must have drawn off the first Radiant Artifact. That's the only answer I can come up with for that. That they just didn't have that before, and drawing it off that Radiant Artifact really was bad at that time because they'd already done their trading. And if they didn't, and they already had that Radiant Artifact, I feel like they really missed the opportunity to go for lethal there. But for us, it worked out quite nicely. And so that wraps up the Midsword games. Midsword has been pretty fun. I mean, it's definitely not the worst class out there, and it does have its own strengths, which are really nice. Being able to put out pressure while dealing with pressure at the same time works really well. It does kind of get beaten out by Forest, and I haven't actually seen any Daria to fight with this deck yet, so I can't give a clear representation of that matchup, but due to how aggressive this deck might be able to be, I think it has a fair matchup, at least comparing it to other decks of a similar nature. So hopefully guys have enjoyed this video. If you did, you'll find the deck list in the description below. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, and I will catch you guys next time. See ya.